people feed people. Neil Kring's story is told to Josh Zolman, performed by Carl Frost. Over spring break this last year, a local teacher was talking to some 5th and 7th graders who were at her house. What would make your life less stressful over break? She asked them. And to help answer the question, she gave the kids some options: having things to do, having transportation to get around, etc. Would make all the difference, each of them replied, without exception, if we didn't have to hustle for food. We realized that not being in school for these kids meant that they would miss out on multiple meals each day. While this is a particular instance where something fell through the cracks, it represents a normal situation that many families in our community face: having access to the things they desperately need. I recently visited some people and communities in Colombia. Amidst a great deal of wonderful experiences, there was one that I continue to think about as I live and walk among my neighbors here in Muncie. I was deeply affected by a cultural difference I've also witnessed in West Africa. They do not have the same sort of system like we have for free distribution of food. Everyone, even the very poor, pay at least a little for what they have. However, there's a cultural expectation that if you show up at someone's house, they feed you. This happened over and over everywhere we went. We would sit down in someone's home, and we would not leave without being given no less than coffee and a kind of fried bread common in the area. Certainly, their culture places a high value on hospitality, but there is a common belief that all people should have food. Instead of systems and structures bearing the weight of setting that up for everyone, they believe that people feed people, regardless of how much those people have. In our communities, we are mostly concerned with ourselves. I focus on my own personal opportunities and my advancement. Consequently, there seems to be a cultural adherence to the relationship between what we need and our ability to work for it, rather than a belief that people's needs are a fundamental right, i.e. food, clothing, shelter, even things we overlook as intrinsically necessary like peace and pleasure. Indeed, there is an underlying cultural conviction expressed as, if you have a problem that keep you from having the resources to obtain those things, then maybe you don't deserve them. Maybe no one would overtly say that, but our structures demonstrate a cruelty that conveys this. So then, there's a subsequent blindness that ignores the many things we all need to be able to acquire resources in order to live full and whole lives. Unfortunately, in our society, we're all right with that, with people not having enough, and it being very difficult to change the trajectory of their life. We decided to do something different, to begin walking with our neighbors. We first started doing neighborhood meals at Avondale over 7 years ago, and our intention was not for them to be about food. They were to be about connection. It is my own neighborhood, and many people around the community would have described themselves as feeling some sort of isolation, even among neighbors at that time. So we wanted to bring people together into a friendly environment where connection genuinely happened. When I look back at all those years ago, at what has transpired from then until now, I can see that most of what have done has come from the connections made as a result of sharing food together. These times have an even greater significance now than they did back then, because we've been able to do so many things as a result of the relationships we have built sharing food together over the years. These connections have led to life happening, and it happening together. Some of this started with faith experiences. When people would come together, we would talk together, and we would sing together. On a December evening, one of our groups stood up and sang "Joy to the World" a cappella. I vividly remember people around the room standing up and joining in. Afterwards, person after person, sometimes tearfully, wanted to talk about their experience of growing up in church. The food provided an opportunity for this experience that people have gotten disconnected from. Well, we can all listen to music on our own. There was something peculiar that happened for people and encountering it together that elicited an emotional response. Doing communion together is another great example. When people would participate, they weren't receiving it as traditional church experience. They were receiving communion as a conversation, as a coming together of people who loved each other and saw each other as equals and gave themselves in interesting ways. Food. That has been the catalyst for all of this. It's a perfect channel because the truth is people do not have enough. Sometimes they're just looking for food because they need it. But we have found it to be the thing that brings us together. It can be surprising in our community to find people experiencing that kind of hunger. But that is what I find. People that have not eaten in quite a while, days in fact. So we help them to understand all of the places right here in our community where they can access food throughout the day and the week. And there's a myriad of ways people can find it. Unfortunately, there are complications to what a system like this creates. If you live around some of these places that give out free food, you don't actually ever have to buy it. Make no mistake, it takes real motivation and work to orchestrate how to get to all these places. However, there is a kind of dependence that is created. Now, we are in a food crisis. So we're in a good place where, because we have access to resources that our neighbors do not, we can give them what they desperately need. But this is not where we want to end up. This is not the cultural shift I long for, where people give to each other because we all believe something I saw demonstrated in Colombia. People want to be able to contribute, to have something they can give to others that have needs. I see it every day. I think all of this is related to living in a community with such a high rate of poverty. We have many more people who are dependent on acquiring food at little to no cost and need food stamps to make it. We know we're not going to solve complex societal issues with just food, but through the relationships that are being made. We believe we can at least confront the systems at work to keep things this way. What is happening in our city that keeps 30% of the population below the poverty line? We can come together to ask these kinds of questions because in our time together, we've shared space together and learned about one another. From 5 until about 6:30 a.m., until about 6:30 on a Thursday night, we continue to see the dawn of good things. We've started a bike shop that kids in the neighborhood work at. We have built a harm reduction street outreach team. We've empowered people to become community health workers. We started food giveaways during the COVID pandemic. We've given the administrative help people need to fill out forms and complete paperwork to simply get what they need. We've done community advocacy for a crisis center that has given rise to a neighborhood group. All of this is complicated. It's messy, complex, human. What we're doing may not solve big problems, but we're doing them together. That's how our journey will push further in the right direction. When we start walking with each other, when we pay attention and make sure we all have enough, who knows what will happen? I want to believe that someday we'll move out of crisis and into sustainability and thriving. I believe that it may happen when those who are most impacted by the issues become the actual answer to the problem. They will become problem solvers because their dignity has been restored. And that is something worth fighting for.